I'm Dr. Aimie, your guide for transforming your trauma into your gift. You adapted to life experiences to survive, but you are not your trauma. Join me as I teach the science and biology of trauma that allows us to be strategic, intentional, and organized in your approach to address difficult and painful life experiences that has become your biology. Trauma Healing Accelerated is where you get a roadmap for the right tools in the right order for your healing journey. What goes wrong is when we're not having that acute stress response carried out in our lives. And so there are a number of disorders, right, that you can say that are coming out of a stress response gone wrong. But how do you know a stress response has gone wrong? I'm going to share with you the exact time frames that an acute stress response should be in your body. And you're going to want to write this down. Cortisol, those changes are seen in your blood levels at 15 minutes after an acute stress and remain elevated for several hours. Adrenaline is in 30 seconds to 20 minutes. And then it slowly starts to lose its effect so that after 30 minutes, you're really not feeling the effect of adrenaline anymore. So adrenaline being the first surge is 30 seconds, right? Because you feel that adrenaline pretty quickly. It's amazing how fast those messages are. 30 seconds to 15 to 20 minutes. That's your adrenaline. That's it. Cortisol then comes on at 15 minutes. You can start to see those changes happening in the blood. If you were measuring your blood, you would see changes in cortisol levels happening at about 15 minutes after an acute stress and then remain elevated for several hours. And I did say hours, not days. You caught that, right? Just making sure. Because as we look at what has gone wrong, that's what goes wrong, is that these levels of these hormones are not in these time frames that it should be for an acute stress. So how does it look when an acute stress disorder goes wrong? Well, that can be things like even something called an acute stress disorder, chronic stress disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, childhood post-traumatic stress disorder, adjustment disorder. Adjustment disorder is commonly referred to with grief, change in grief. And I worked with a lady in Colorado, academic psychologist, and she was going on about 20 years of still not being able to move through her grief response. 20 years of grieving and not being able to move through that. So that again, she's still in stress response, and it's the stress response gone wrong. Then let's look at hormones. So I've already mentioned adrenaline, that is your initial surge of energy, and we want to learn how to use that to our benefit, because that's where our source of strength comes from. Like, that's our fuel. And if we miss that time frame, we're setting ourselves up for moving into a stress disorder or a chronic stress. So we want to learn how to appropriately use that adrenaline in the first 15 minutes after an acute response. Cortisol. Now, cortisol is, and if you're filling out your worksheet, you'll know that you need to fill this out. Cortisol is one of the most misunderstood stress hormones. The most neglected is oxytocin, which is known as the love hormone. And there are not only effects on oxytocin as a result of chronic stress, but then there are ways that we can leverage oxytocin for the stress response and bringing it back to health. Hormones, so sex hormones. So the stress response really does kill all of them. It also can tend to lead someone more towards an estrogen dominance, but testosterone is definitely affected. That is one of those hormones. Well, progesterone and testosterone, both of those hormones are ones that I want you to learn how to be able to leverage in the right way to be able to kind of gain back your healthy stress response and be able to use it in the right way. The thyroid hormones. Oh my goodness, I have seen so many people. Pam was one lady who came to me, and she had been told by her functional medicine doctor that her thyroid levels were off, but everything that they were doing was not working because they were focused on the thyroid hormones. And so when you look at your thyroid panel and you're not just looking at your T4 or your TSH, like your conventional medicine provider would likely check, you really do want to look at T3 and your reverse T3. All of those, that whole panel, when there are imbalances in those and certain imbalances, that's going to suggest we've got a stress disorder and we need to do something about it. And specifically looking at the stress response and getting that back to a healthy place. Insulin is another one. So insulin, stress will make and promote insulin resistance, which means that your insulin will not work as well. Oxytocin, melatonin. So how many have heard of other people, because of course it wouldn't be affecting us, but how many have heard of other people whose sleep has been affected by stress? Right, so that's your melatonin system. So this is another hormone that we need tools for. Leptin and ghrelin. So leptin is actually the hormone that is made by fat cells and the cells in your intestinal wall, and they control hunger and appetite. Ghrelin is actually known as the hunger hormone. This hormone is actually so much more than just the hunger hormone. So I will drop an article in the chat here that you guys can all read on your own time and geek out about it and learn how it can be so much more than just hunger hormone and how it would be involved in all of this stress response stuff. And I know that I'm going through this material fast, wanting to give you guys a good overview of all of the different hormones involved in stress, because you thought it was just adrenaline or cortisol, and there's so many more. Now, one thing that you do need to know about hormones would be something that's called the cortisol steal. So the cortisol steal is what happens when, due to high levels of cortisol, which does not always happen, but when it does, then we need to know about the cortisol steal. And so with the cortisol steal, it shunts all of the other hormones down into the cortisol pathway. And so this is the reason why the sex hormones, their levels go down. Progesterone level goes down, DHEA goes down, right? And so many people are given DHEA, but yet if they haven't been able to fix their stress response yet, it's still all going to be shunted towards cortisol and not be going to these other hormones that they need. So let's go into hidden stressors, because the people who are the most impacted by hidden stresses are those people who are your empaths, your intuitives, your introverts, those people who would identify as being a highly sensitive person. And all of them, I have found hidden sources of stress. And these are what lead to chronic stress and really being able to say that you just don't have the energy to live the calling on your life